We're here this morning with Chris Breen, who has a profile on FindaGuitarTeacher.com. Good morning, Chris. Thanks for being with us today.
Morning, James. Thanks for having me on.
It's a real pleasure. I'm looking forward to learning more about you. Can you tell us first, where do you teach? Where are you located?
I'm actually in northern New Jersey, a suburb of New York City, probably a half an hour outside of New York City. So in this area, Passaic and Morris County, I could teach from my house a little bit, but I have limited space. So I can also go to the student's home, and I also obviously do Skype lessons as well.
Awesome. And when you travel to students' homes, how far do you travel? And feel free to be as specific as you want to. I'm thinking it'll be people in your area who will be listening to this.
Sure. I mean, I could do a 15 to 20-minute ride, generally speaking. There's a town, West Milford, which is north of me, which is about 20 minutes away. I'd say that's probably the farthest out I'll go. Anything beyond that, it's a little too far. But yeah, generally 20 minutes or so.
So West Milford is kind of the limit. And can you say again the town where you are?
Pequannock.
Mm-hmm. So anywhere between Pequannock and West Milford is an area where you'll travel to?
Yeah, generally. Yep.
Got it. And you said you also offer the Skype lessons as well, where suddenly distance means nothing.
Absolutely. That's the great thing about the internet. You know, you can find a whole new plethora of students, and it's just great. Yeah.
It really is. Well, can you tell us a little bit about students when they contact you for lessons, whether it's local students or Skype students? Are there certain styles of music that you find most students are interested in learning?
Usually, what they hear on the radio, current, I guess you call it pop or rock, anything with a rock twist. But I could teach anything, Taylor Swift for younger kids or anything that they hear on their local rock radio station. I mean, I like to do rock, blues, metal, things like that. But especially with pop music, it's a very diatonic, kind of conventional melodic content. So it's easier to break down and to, relay those kind of concepts to a student. So I can go anything within that realm pretty much.
And you find, you mentioned the styles of music that you yourself are into. Are your students open to going into new styles of music that perhaps you're into that you'd like to show them, or does that vary from student to student?
It definitely varies from student to student. If they really have a passion about a certain style of music or a certain genre, I'm not going to kind of twist their arm and make them go down my path. I feel like it's obviously more about the student. So if they want to learn what they want to learn, I will guide them in that path. But if I see that they're open to different styles, then, maybe I will tease them a little bit. I'll show them some concepts from a different style of music. And if I see that it's interesting them, then I will obviously do that as well. So it's a little balance of both.
Certainly. And it sounds like you have the guitar teacher method down where you really have to be very much on your toes and kind of be ready to go a little bit further if the student is ready for it, but also to kind of back off if you feel that the student has hit a wall. You mentioned balance. It is a real balancing act. It sounds like you have that down very well.
Yeah, with experience, obviously that's nothing, it's hard to teach that as far as being a teacher yourself. You have to kind of learn that through trial and error and having different styles of students and different learning styles. Once you realize that it's a constant adjustment. You shouldn't really have a very dogmatic curriculum because at that point people are going to start to lose you if you don't feed off of what the student is wanting to learn or their style of learning and all that kind of stuff. So it is definitely a balancing act and you have to constantly adjust.
Very well said, Chris. And can you tell us, do you teach both adults and children?
Yes, I have a little less experience teaching children, but I have started to have a few students that are younger. And yeah, it's a little different, but at the end of the day, if you teach them something that they're interested in, if you strike that commonality of, let's say, like Taylor Swift or one of those big, pop acts, as soon as you get something that they're interested in, I think it kind of is smooth sailing after that. You just have to be patient and they'll get it eventually. So,
of course. And yeah, once again, very well described. And can you describe a little bit, say, the scheduling format with students? How often do you work with students?
Actually, I'm kind of in a transitional period right now. I'm just about to start at a music store in my local area too. So I had a decent handful of students privately. Now I'm going to be starting working at a music store, which they do a lot of the booking as well. So I think my schedule is just about to get into a very full-time mode, whereas before I was doing probably half of the week was teaching. I think now I'm going to be going into a more of a full-time approach as far as in-person lessons and things like that go.
Yes, and that's wonderful, Chris. That's very good news. And when you teach privately, how long are your lessons? Are they an hour or longer than that? What is the general guitar lesson you teach?
For a while, I was consistently doing an hour for students that were obviously a little older in the adult range. I noticed with younger people, though, a half an hour is definitely better. You don't want to overwhelm them. And even for some beginners that are adults, an hour might be too much. The upside about an hour is that you can reinforce a concept. You could spend maybe the first half hour introducing new concepts and then spending that second half an hour practicing and playing along and like reinforcing it. But for younger people, I feel like a half an hour is probably as far as it'll go before they start to lose interest a little bit.
Of course. And at the store where you'll be teaching, will it be the same thing where it'll be mostly half hour or hour, a mixture of both?
Yeah, I mean, from what I know, the half an hour is more common, but I think they do offer hour-long lessons as well. But yeah, like I said, I think especially for beginners, a half hour is probably more reasonable.
And can you tell us the name of the store so that people wanting to come to the store were looking for you, they would know where to go?
Sure, the Music Den in Butler, New Jersey.
Got it. And you said you have started teaching there, or you will be very soon?
I will be very soon.
Excellent. And I notice you have a guitar with you there. Would you like to play something? People who have done the interviews have been playing a section of a song, often like 20 or 30 seconds. It's very helpful for us to hear your playing so we can get a taste for your own guitar playing.
Absolutely, sure.
That is awesome, Chris. That sounds great. And I noticed the style of guitar you have. I know a couple of my students have had that style. I seem to associate it a lot with Pantera. Is that a band that you're into?
That's funny you mentioned that, actually. Pantera was definitely a band that got me really into music when I was like 15 years old, at that age where you start to really get into music. Pantera was a huge influence on me. I've gotten a lot more eclectic since then. I listen to pretty much everything at this point. But yeah, when I was a young teenager, Pantera was definitely the band that I listened to a lot, for sure.
You certainly weren't alone in that. They were a huge band at the time.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, how did you learn to play guitar?
It's funny. So I was about 13 or 14, and my parents were cleaning out our attic, and we found my father had an old acoustic that was in very bad condition, but it still could play. Mm-hmm. And I think he forgot he even had it up there. And we brought it out of the attic, and I just started messing around with it, and I would learn songs from the radio on just the low E string. I wasn't I wasn't doing chords or anything. I was just trying to figure out the bass line, and it really solidified my rhythm because I wasn't thinking about the physical nature of chord fingering or anything like that. I was just following bass lines and getting the groove and the rhythmic tempos and things like that. So that's kind of how I did my thing for the first year or so. And then I got more serious and took private lessons for about a year and a half, and that's when I really got into it. But that first year, I felt like I was just playing bass guitar, basically, because I was just learning the single notes, you know?
You were using what you had. That's very cool. And you mentioned that you started taking guitar lessons. Do you find that in your own teaching, you're adopting some of the method that your teacher used, or perhaps trying not to do some of the things your teacher did? How did your own lessons influence your teaching?
It's a mix. I like the experience. The lessons that I had were beneficial. I learned how to hone in my technique as far as, how I finger scales and things like that. There's a few things I was doing wrong, which he corrected. But at the same time, I don't think he was customizing lessons for my personal tastes either. He was a pretty good teacher, but you could tell he was basically doing the things that he knew how to play. He didn't take as much time to learn the stuff that I wanted to learn. So, I took from that like that maybe I should customize when I teach. I should obviously customize, lessons for students more. So, it was a mix of experience.
And going back to your students now, do you teach all different levels of student?
Absolutely, yes. I've had absolute beginners who barely have calluses on their fingers,
Yes.
and from that to people who just want to brush up on their music theory or learn different phrasing or stuff like that. I've taught people that are in their 50s that want to just kind of learn solidify their blues technique from like classic rock and things like that. So yeah, I've had a wide range.
And when your students come to you, certainly beginners will need to find a guitar of their own, but more advanced students also will be looking for new guitars. Do you help them choose new guitars and offer guidance to them about that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't really necessarily go and let them know which kind of brand to buy per se, but the one thing I let them know, I explain to them what action is and to make sure that the action isn't too far off the fretboard, because if it is, especially if you're a beginner, you're going to get discouraged. You're going to think that you're just not doing a good enough job,
Of
whereas
course.
it's really just the way the guitar is set up, which will adversely affect the first few months you play. So I just make sure that they get something with a low action, and then his intonation has to be at least somewhere reasonable, where you're not going to voice different chords and they all sound out of tune in different positions.
Right, right.
So, but yeah, I don't necessarily go with like brand specific, but as long as they have those two things that are moderately well off, then it should be okay.
Well, just those two things alone, those are two very valuable pieces of advice.
Yep.
Think what a crucial thing that is about the action. If you're, and someone who's looking for a guitar, especially a beginner, wouldn't know to look for that. So I'd say that's as valuable as talking about brands.
Sure, absolutely. I agree.
Well, Chris Breen, we're going to end the interview in a minute, but this has been a real pleasure to talk to you. It's wonderful to hear you discuss your teaching and to hear you play. And I want to wish you best of luck in your guitar teaching. Both you are certainly in a lot of places. You do it at the home, you go to students' homes, you'll be teaching at the music den, and you also give Skype lessons. So I think anyone who gets in touch with you has found an outstanding guitar teacher.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on again, James. I appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure, Chris, and I hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday and take care.
Thank you. You too.